Hey y'all, David Torque here, and welcome back to the Torque Force channel. I'm joined by my friends Arcarius and Brodavia. They both helped found this channel, and today, with all the recent growth we've had, we thought it might be fun to share a collaborative perspective of our top 10 favorite Zelda games. Keep in mind, this is all our opinion, so if you think differently, that's totally okay. In fact, let us know what you think in the comments section. We'd love to hear all about it. So now, without further ado, let's get into our top 10 favorite Zelda games. And real quick, before we do, I'd like to direct your all's attention to the subscriber button. The Torque Force is getting dangerously close to our goal of 1,000 subscribers. So if you're watching this video and haven't subscribed yet, I'd really appreciate it if you clicked that button and subscribed. It's free and it really helps our channel. Thanks a ton for your all's support. Okay, shameless plug over. Back to the video.
Number 10.
First up on our ranking is Skyward Sword, and frankly, even though this game is at the bottom of the list, I believe it is severely overhated by the fans. As one of the few people that actually enjoys the motion controls in this game, I feel it is very underrated and deserves more appreciation. The only issues I really have with the game is that the overworld sky is a little barren, and the levels themselves are kind of small and linear, with not a lot of variety and a bit of backtracking involved. That said, the games make up for it with its engaging combat, use of items, clever dungeon design, and interesting story. In addition, the music is absolutely phenomenal, with this game being the first in the series to have a fully orchestrated soundtrack. The music always fits each situation really well, and it complements the character interactions as well. Speaking of, the characters are really well done here, showing much more expression and motivation compared to previous games in the series. Of course, everybody loves our main man Groose, but even some of the side characters are given a brief chance to shine in a side quest or story deviation. Skyloft is a great main hub, as it actually feels like a real lived-in place with people to talk to and items to buy and upgrade, which is a great feature this game introduced. Being able to take the items you have and improve them is a nice addition. Overall, I think Skyward Sword is still very much worth playing today. It's a fun game with a great story and unique gameplay. And if you don't like the motion controls, you can turn them off in the new Switch version. But personally, I believe you're missing out on the experience if you choose to turn them off.
Number 9.
Link's Awakening is truly a masterpiece among the Zelda series. When I originally played this game on my Game Boy Color, I really didn't know what to expect. I'd heard the game was set outside of Hyrule and that certain Mario characters made appearances in the game, but honestly, this information didn't really prepare me for much. Knowing those facts doesn't give you any actual idea of the depth and individuality of this game. Link's Awakening is unlike any other Zelda game that I've played. Between the fun gameplay and the beautiful story, this game easily cements itself in the top 10 list and is definitely one of the best and most unique Zelda games ever made. Link's Awakening was the first Zelda game to come out on a handheld console. It released in 1993 for the original Game Boy. It was also the very first Zelda game to come out after A Link to the Past, so it had very large shoes to fill. Despite these high expectations though, Link's Awakening delivered a gameplay experience like no other. This game masterfully delivers a charming and emotional story. Koholint is such an energetic island, and all the kooky characters throughout the game are such a joy to meet and interact with. As you play the game, you really gain a familiarity for the island and all the locals, especially if you do the trading side quests, since you get to see even more personal sides of all the characters on the island. In addition, the friendship you form with Marin really connects you to the island and its inhabitants far more. Unfortunately though, this makes beating the game that much harder because, as it's revealed throughout the story, none of this is real. Koholint Island lies outside the realm of reality. All it is a dream, and Link is trapped in it. As you learn that the goal of the game is to escape the Windfish's dream and return to reality, you really start to dread that moment when the game ends because you don't want to lose this charming world and all the relationships you've made in it. Just like when you're actually having a really good dream, you don't want to wake up from it. You know that waking up means ending the dream and returning to the real world. The charm has gone, the dream has ended, and now it's just back to regular life. Only it's not. You see, dreams aren't meant to be infinite. Dreams are meant to motivate, inspire, and encourage creativity. And the finale of this game brings all of that into focus, delivering a truly emotional and satisfying conclusion to Link's adventures on Koholint Island. I'll spare you all the details though, because really if you haven't, you should go and experience the finale for yourself. Link's Awakening is truly a hidden gem and masterpiece of the Zelda series. The game delivers an incredible story accompanied by fun and dynamic gameplay, and outside of that, the game offers even more that I haven't even mentioned, such as the incredible dungeons and beautiful soundtrack. If you haven't played Link's Awakening yet, you really ought to give it a try. You won't regret it.
Number 8.
Ocarina of Time. I did my best to get this game placed higher on our list, but it looks like we're in the timeline where the hero fails. Ocarina is one of only a few Zelda games which transcends gaming and impacts culture as a whole. That being said, it does quite a bit for gaming too. This game released originally at a time when barely any other video game had successfully managed to craft a meaningful experience in three-dimensional virtual environments. The mission of Ocarina of Time was to distill a Zelda game down to its fundamental components and place it in this new space. The greatest achievement of this approach was the tone of the game. Ocarina of Time is defined as much by what you can't see as what you can. Looking around the environments became similar to walking around them from a design standpoint. The game is oozing in atmosphere from the second the Nintendo 64 is switched on. Link rides by at night on Epona, while the flute music from the first Zelda is extended, immediately connecting new and old. We'd never seen Link on a horse before, but the music was familiar. Something about those N64 graphics too. Ooh boy! In fact, the slightly muddy textures and the angular models provide an ambiguity, which lends itself well to allowing the imagination to fill in the blanks. It really feels as though the whole land of Hyrule is very old in this game. Here's my brief defense for the wonky, by today's standard, controls. First, have you seen an N64 claw troller? I mean, come on, broski. Look me in the eye and tell me that you can just map boots to R3. Also, Z-targeting is a pretty ingenious way to immerse the player in an intense fight. It forces you to physically tighten your grip to stay in control. Oh no! A Lizzlefuss is hopping around trying to get me! I can't see him! The camera's going everywhere! Ah! Ocarina's sound design is maybe the best in the series. Seriously, this is practically Star Wars levels of greatness when it comes to sound effects and score. From... to... This game has a wonderful score. From its rearrangements of classic Zelda tunes to its brand new melodies and atmospheric tracks, the sheer scope of the music is truly magical. This is a game about overcoming adversity, being heroic and choosing to grow up. I played this game with my brother when we were kids, and I don't ever think I'll forget the moments we experienced together while playing this. I still remember cowering while I watched him explore the well, or getting excited as we tried to escape the Gerudo Fortress. Even among Zelda games, there are few titles, if any, that change the landscape of gaming in the way that Ocarina of Time did. But there are even fewer that will leave as lasting an impact on players as this one.
Number 7.
Next on our list is Twilight Princess. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering why we put this one ahead of Ocarina in our ranking. Well, let me explain, and keep in mind that a lot of this is my personal opinion and should be taken as such. While Ocarina of Time is still an amazing game and is absolutely worth playing today, I believe it has aged a bit over time. The locales can look a bit empty, the story is very minimal outside the main quest, and the visuals leave a lot to be desired, both in terms of characters and backgrounds. Twilight Princess, on the other hand, has all the things that make Ocarina an amazing game and cranks them up significantly. The world feels more lived in, and there are a decent amount of side quests and bonuses to obtain. The story is weird and interesting, with the Twilight Realm and Zant being interesting additions. Due to the fact that the game was made for the GameCube rather than the N64, there are more cutscenes featuring genuine character moments that allow the story to grow and feel more impactful. The part where Colin gets captured by the Bokoblins and Link has to save him has no bearing on the overall story, but was something added anyway because they wanted to add it, and it results in one of the most epic shots in the entire franchise. The N64 games had cutscenes, yes, but the scale had to be cut down due to the limitations of the console. The dungeons are not only fun, but feel like real places and environments. I particularly like the Arbiter's Grounds and Snow Peak Ruins, as they both capture the abandoned feel really well, giving off a vibe that can't be found anywhere else in game. I also feel like the signature dungeon item is utilized better in each of Twilight Princess's dungeons rather than Ocarina's. You truly get to see how useful, or not useful, each item is before leaving the dungeon, rather than just being used to solve a puzzle and defeat the boss. On top of that, there is a larger selection of items than before to mix up the gameplay, and when combined with the unlockable sword moves and Wolf Link, it creates the most varied Zelda up to this point. The music is also standout, with Hyrule Field, Midna's Lament, and Hidden Village being some of my personal favorites. While Ocarina of Time may have been a more important game for its time, Twilight Princess takes the base of Ocarina and nearly perfects its concepts.
Number 6.
Coming in at number 6 on our list is The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker. Being the first console Zelda game released after Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, it's no understatement to say that expectations for this game were very high. It's also no understatement to say that first impressions of this game were very low. Fans of the more realistic, grittier, darker Zelda games weren't expecting the bright, cartoony, lighthearted style that The Wind Waker had, and this game initially got poor reviews. What's funny though is that over time this game has really aged like a fine wine. Nowadays, all the fans of the series that I've spoken with have only had positive things to say about The Wind Waker. I think that we here at the Torque Force can really only mirror that positivity. Boasting a massive world, beautiful cel-shaded graphics, and an intricate story filled to the brim with fun and unique characters, The Wind Waker offers an incredible experience that honestly feels like it's ahead of its time and ahead of the GameCube that it originally released on. From a gameplay perspective, The Wind Waker takes the 3D gameplay that was established in Ocarina of Time and improves on it. The scale of the game feels so much larger, and a lot of that has to do with the Great Sea. See, The Wind Waker is set in the same Hyrule as Ocarina of Time, but since Ocarina of Time, a great flood occurred, leaving the Hyrule that Ocarina fans knew so well completely underwater. Now Hyrule's a Great Sea, and Link travels the Great Sea from island to island on his ship, the King of Red Lions. Traveling the Great Sea gives the game a much more grandiose feel, and really, this game is as close to an open world game as the Zelda team had gotten prior to Breath of the Wild. The Zelda team did a great job at making this faux open world worth exploring too. While the game does follow a linear story, there are plenty of islands to explore as you travel from point A to point B, and these islands are all filled with various towns, dungeons, enemy bases, and characters. Depending on where you sail, you might even encounter cyclones, a ghost ship, or even a 35-year-old man who thinks he's a fairy. Moving on from the open world though, the story in this game is incredible. Since the game is set in the same Hyrule as Ocarina of Time, the game follows up on Ocarina of Time's story, and we even get to face off against the same Ganondorf from Ocarina of Time. Ganondorf's motivations in this game are very interesting, and at times you almost feel sympathetic for him. At the same time though, you also see the evil, domineering side of Ganondorf, and you remember that you have to beat him in order to save Hyrule, Tetra, and your sister, Aryll. I won't give up too much more about the story because I'm sure some of you all haven't played the game yet and you're planning to in the future. One thing I will share though is that Link's motivations from the very beginning of the story are unlike those that we've seen in any other Zelda game so far. In a lot of Zelda games, Link is almost summoned or sent on his quest by Princess Zelda. But in this game, Zelda isn't the reason that Link sets out on his quest. In fact, we don't see Zelda in The Wind Waker for the majority of the game. What motivates Link from the very get-go is his younger sister, who he has to rescue from the clutches of Ganondorf. Link, who at the time is really just some random kid on an island, sets out to rescue his sister, and over time we get to see this goofy kid become the courageous hero that we knew he was destined to be. It's very cool, and like I said, I won't give up any more spoilers. If you haven't played the game, I'll let you experience it for yourself. All in all, The Wind Waker is an amazing game, and like I said, it really has aged like a fine wine. Boasting a huge world, unique art style, and an intricate story filled to the brim with quirky characters, It's a Zelda game that you can't pass up. A lot of you probably think that we're crazy only putting The Wind Waker at number 6 in our top 10 Zelda games, but if anything, I think that speaks paramount to how high our expectations are for the series. So let's get into it. We've now made it to our top 5 Zelda games.
Number 5.
A Link to the Past is a special Zelda game. It may even be the most Zelda game. While it wasn't the first one in the series, it cultivated all the aspects of the series which made it legendary. Zelda 2 introduced us to the idea that every Zelda game would try to innovate and provide us with new experiences. But Link to the Past was Zelda 2. Zelda as a series has always sought to be an experience in which you feel like there is adventure unseen. Nearly every game in this franchise features 2 explorable worlds: past and present, day and twilight, sky and ground. Zelda 1 had the overworld and the dungeons. Adventure of Link had top-down and side-scroller. A Link to the Past was the first game to really push this design concept to new heights. The light and dark worlds changed how you viewed the game. When the wizard Aghanim is defeated, you might feel like you just beat the game, but the main game is just getting started. Many things in the light world have reflections in the dark world. Maybe that's why a mirror is used to traverse the two. Somehow this makes the game feel so much deeper than a typical adventure. No matter where you go, there's an entire other world beneath your feet. The soundtrack and score is amazing. Koji Kondo sells the scale of the adventure with a combination of rearrangements of older Zelda tracks and brand new ones which have become staples to this day. Hyrule Castle, Drawing the Master Sword, The Dark World, the prologue, all iconic tracks. The seldomly used Triforce theme is great too. Quick sidebar, ever think it was weird that the game is called Link to the Past when there is no time travel? The Japanese name for the game is actually translated as Triforce of the Gods, which makes quite a bit more sense. Anyway, the gameplay is a much more refined version of Zelda 1, with more imaginative weapons and snappier controls. The dungeons are about as atmospheric as a 2D game can get, and the enemies and bosses are fun to conquer. Aghanim introduces us to the Dead Man's Volley. The final fight with Ganon is incredible. It's paced in a way in which he's not meant to take all your hearts, but rather to force a restart in the fight by pushing you into the pits he creates. He also requires that you upgrade the Master Sword and find the Silver Arrows, making exploration a necessary component to his demise. A Link to the Past was the first game I ever played, and its influence on my expectations of game design are near constant these days. I think I will always be quite nostalgic for those simpler days when epic fights with evil were straightforward and the world could be saved.
Number 4.
The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask. Easily one of the most interesting and unique games in the Zelda series. What I particularly love about this entry is how it follows up the previous entry, especially given the limited time span. For those who don't know, Majora's Mask was given a very short development period. This allowed for a game that could be both enjoyable and unpredictable. I also believe that unlike most games released for the Nintendo 64, Majora takes full advantage of the hardware by being a game that is at its core a Nintendo 64 game. Other games on the system were mainly just trying to be the same series as before, just in 3D. The developers of Majora knew the limitations of the hardware and, as a result, created a game that uses those limitations to its advantage. Take the visuals, for example. While the N64 was capable of 3D models, it's obvious that those models didn't look very realistic, with some characters in particular looking strange and kind of creepy. Majora's Mask, then, is a game full of strange and creepy characters. The N64 also had limited memory, so rather than make a game that's big and expansive, the developers created a more personal experience that revolves around replaying the same scenarios over and over again, just with subtle differences every time. While Ocarina of Time was a landmark game that stands out on any platform, Majora's Mask feels like a game that is meant to be played on the N64. The dark ambience, engaging storyline, and unique 3D mechanic all combine to create a game that is unlike any other, and is still worth experiencing even decades later.
Number 3.
A Link Between Worlds started out as a remake of A Link to the Past. It didn't take long for Nintendo developers to realize that with a foundation so sturdy, they could build an even greater castle. The gaming landscape had changed a lot since 1991, and even the Zelda series itself was growing in a new direction. Many of the huge 3D Zelda experiences had emphasized atmosphere, puzzles, set pieces, and grand imaginations of what Hyrule could be. Link Between Worlds was a response to what those games were beginning to stray away from: the choice of exploration. Link Between Worlds allowed for nearly total freedom in your approach to its environments. Stuck on this dungeon? Try that one. Bored of bombs? Swap them for arrows. Sometimes, you didn't even need to open the big chests in the dungeons to progress. Rupees finally meant something too, and not in a "you can power the magic armor" way, Twilight Princess. Rupees now equal weapons. So now exploring just gives you heart pieces? You can upgrade all of your weapons meaningfully! Technically, this is the first new 3D Zelda game in the series. How is this shown off? By making Link 2D, of course. Nintendo, you clowns. Ironically, it is quite effective at showing off the feature. Many puzzles require you to conceptualize the environment as a 3D space in order to progress. Plenty of examples of this: the first dungeon elevators, wall masters pushing buttons on the grates, and of course, the wall merging mechanic opens many avenues for exploration. Quick sidebar: while the title, A Link Between Worlds, makes considerably more sense than A Link to the Past did, the Japanese title for this game is Triforce of the Gods 2. Perhaps that makes even more sense in context. The soundtrack is the super extra special deluxe of Link to the Past, with many amazing originals as well. Ravio's theme, Hilda's theme, the Maya Maya song, and more are modern classics. This game is capped off by the unbeatable dungeon theme of Lorule Castle, which is probably underrated despite its immense popularity. Link Between Worlds contains arguably the best Zelda story as well. It builds on Link to the Past with Lorule, which is essentially an improved Dark World, and amazing new characters who represent the dark reflections of the main characters. There's the cowardly Ravio, the foolish Hilda, and the weak Yuga, compared to the courageous Link, the wise Zelda, and the powerful Ganon. The story is simple, but it is undoubtedly effective. Playing Link Between Worlds on my Zelda Special Edition 3DS on release day was very exciting, but I never could have predicted how exciting the experience of saving both Hyrule and Lorule would continue to feel all these years later. Happy 10-year anniversary, Link Between Worlds.
Number 2.
Breath of the Wild. For me, this is where it all began. This game is what fueled my love for the Zelda series. I think most people would agree that this game is in the top 5 of their favorite Zelda games, but for us, it definitely falls at the number 2 spot. Boasting a massive open world and whole new styles of gameplay and storytelling, Breath of the Wild ushered in what you might call the new era of Zelda games. From the very beginning of the game, you're immersed into a mysterious land without any idea what's going on, and it's up to you to explore this world and find the story for yourself. Since Breath of the Wild puts the focus on exploration, it was critically important that they delivered a map with plenty of things to do and discover. One problem that I've noticed with some open world games is that they'll create this massive, expansive world, but then they'll neglect to fill it with things to capture the player's attention. This leaves the player with nothing to motivate them to explore this massive world. Thankfully, Breath of the Wild delivers in that department, including so many different things for the player to get distracted by while traveling from point A to point B. These distractions could be in the form of enemies, shrines, Koroks, and so much more. I mean, even just hunting and gathering materials or finding new landmarks are amazing distractions, and they really aid to the sense of discovery within this game. One bit of criticism that the game received was that the dungeons didn't quite hold up when compared to the dungeons in previous games. While we do think the dungeons in Breath of the Wild might not be as strong as those in previous Zelda games, we still think that the Divine Beasts are a really nice twist to the traditional dungeon format, and we think they offer a new and unique opportunity for problem solving that we really haven't seen before in the series. In addition to the Divine Beasts, Breath of the Wild's world is also scattered with mini dungeons in the form of Sheikah shrines. The shrines are like miniature forms of traditional dungeons from older Zelda games, and there are 120 of them scattered throughout all of Hyrule. Like I mentioned earlier, they're one of the distractions that helps make this game's Hyrule so immersive, but they also offer the opportunity for Link to increase his hearts and stamina. The shrines are a brilliant way to offer health and stamina enhancements, and the more you complete the shrines, the more you can explore with your increased health and stamina. Another bit of criticism that Breath of the Wild received was that the story was weak compared to previous Zelda games. I think a lot of this criticism is actually rooted in traditionalism and resistance to change. Prior to Breath of the Wild, Zelda games typically utilized a more active storytelling method, with all of Link's actions having a real cause and effect towards the story. Breath of the Wild, on the other hand, utilized a much more passive form of storytelling, laying the baseline of the story and then letting Link uncover bits and pieces of it as he explores through Hyrule. A lot of Breath of the Wild's story is set in the past, so it's a lot more like a mystery that Link has to unravel as he tries to save Zelda and all of Hyrule from Calamity Ganon. Lots of new and interesting characters are introduced as the story unfolds, and the way that the game tells Zelda's story and shows her grow over time is amazing. All in all, Breath of the Wild is an awesome game, and undoubtedly it's one of the best in the entire series. Its focus on exploration and discovery really makes the gameplay experience like nothing the series had ever seen prior. The Zelda team's focus on this new form of gameplay led to changes in their dungeons and storytelling, and while these changes might have received negative reviews from some fans, we think that they allowed the game to be the monumental success that it was. Breath of the Wild really was the shift into a new era of Zelda games, and it did such an incredible job at setting the tone and standard that we as fans can expect from future Zelda games.
Number 1.
Okay, so based on all the other games we've mentioned so far, you've probably figured out that Tears of the Kingdom was going to be number 1. Believe it or not, when it came to our top 3, we actually had a really hard time choosing. Between A Link to the Past, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, we really love the direction that the Zelda team is going with its more recent games.
That's not to say that we dislike the older Zelda games. In reality, there's no bad Zelda game within the entire series. Regardless of what David Tork might say about Zelda 2, the newer games in the series just continue to impress and exceed expectations. Eiji Aonuma and his team have done such a phenomenal job taking the best qualities of the older games and integrating tons of new and unique ideas, quite literally evolving the series into what it is today.
If you've played Breath of the Wild and you've played Tears of the Kingdom, you should be familiar with the similarities and differences between the two games. Each feels similar, but at the same time completely unique. One fear that people had during the development of Tears of the Kingdom was that it was just going to feel like a copy of Breath of the Wild, or as some people put it, $70 DLC. As we got closer to the release of the game, it became increasingly obvious that Tears of the Kingdom was far more than that, and when the game released and we were able to immerse ourselves into the world, it was clear that Tears of the Kingdom was its own unique and independent experience. What's cool about Tears of the Kingdom is that while it does have its own unique feel and function that separates it from Breath of the Wild, it still has everything fans love about Breath of the Wild. But enough about the similarities and differences. What is it about Tears of the Kingdom that cements itself as our number 1 favorite Zelda game?
First of all, Tears of the Kingdom's world is second to none. If you've played Breath of the Wild, you'll likely go into the game with an expectation that the world is going to be exactly the same. While that's partially true, the Zelda team did such a good job at updating the landscape in ways that make Tears of the Kingdom's Hyrule feel new and unexplored. All the different caves, civilizations, enemy camps, and wells are such welcome additions to this world. For people who've explored nearly every single square inch of Hyrule in Breath of the Wild, additions like this really make the world feel new and refreshing. In addition to all of that, Tears of the Kingdom also has a ton of sky islands that you can explore. Traversing through the skies and finding new islands with puzzles, bosses, and treasures is an absolute blast, and it's incredible to see how the Zelda team so seamlessly connected the skies above Hyrule to Hyrule itself. Now, the Zelda team really could have stopped here and delivered an incredible game, but they actually decided to add a whole other layer into this world in the form of the depths. The depths function as an entirely separate world underneath Hyrule, and if you pay attention to the topography on the map, you'll notice that it's an exact mirror image of Hyrule. Boasting tons of Zonai ruins, new enemies, and new environments, the depths create even more opportunity for exploration and discovery. Just watch out for all of Ganondorf's gloom, as it might just sap the life out of you.
In addition to the new and improved world, Tears of the Kingdom also manages to exceed expectations from a gameplay standpoint. While the very basics at its core are just the same as Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom excels at how it takes all of Link's new abilities and uses them to enhance our gameplay experience. The 4 main abilities, Ultra Hand, Fuse, Recall, and Ascend, all have so many practical uses, and you could use them so naturally as you play through the game. You might argue that the controls for some of these abilities are clunky, but at the same time, that's how most new things feel. And as you become familiar with the controls, they become more natural and make much more sense. From a traversal standpoint, all of these abilities are extremely practical. You can use Ultra Hand to build things like planes, hovercrafts, hot air balloons, boats, cars, and plenty of other things that no fan of the series ever imagined would be in a Zelda game. Ascend allows you to travel upwards through various surfaces, making it much easier to get from one place to the next. Recall offers the ability to send things like Sky Island debris back into the sky, allowing Link to quickly access the skies above Hyrule. And Fuse, an ability traditionally used for combat purposes, can also be used to attach various Zonai devices, minecarts, bombs, and much more to different items, creating items that can be used to quickly travel one way or another.
In addition to all the ways that Link's new abilities create opportunities for travel and exploration, they also make combat much more unique in Tears of the Kingdom. Ultra Hand can be used to create devices which aid Link in combat. Ascend can be used to quickly travel to or from enemies, giving Link the upper hand when fighting. Recall allows Link to turn projectiles, like thrown rocks, bombs, and even arrows back at enemies. Of course, Fuse allows Link to create all kinds of various weapons. Shields, bows, arrows, and much more. These new abilities, from both a traversal and combat standpoint, completely change the way you approach Tears of the Kingdom compared to Breath of the Wild. What's crazy though, is that these abilities are only the tip of the iceberg when talking about why Tears of the Kingdom's gameplay is so phenomenal. We'll spare you the details, but there really is so much more that we could discuss, such as all the new items and their abilities within the game, or the fact that Link can literally skydive off of an island thousands of feet in the air and practically fly anywhere he wants to in this grand and expansive world. The last thing we'll mention about Tears of the Kingdom might actually be kind of polarizing, and it's that we think they did a great job of addressing complaints that fans had about Breath of the Wild. In Breath of the Wild, many fans had issues with things like enemy variety, weapon degradation, and of course, climbing in the rain. Rather than get rid of all the things that fans had complained about, Tears of the Kingdom actually kept them in the game. What they did do for a lot of these issues, though, is build solutions into the game for these problems. It's raining out? Oh man, that sucks. Better get out a sticky elixir, or put on the froggy armor so that I can climb better. My weapon is about to break? Better fuse it with something to improve its durability. Ultimately, rather than get rid of the problems, the Zelda team created opportunities for creative problem solving, and at its core, that's really what makes the Zelda series great. For things like the lack of enemy variety in Breath of the Wild, Tears of the Kingdom addressed that by simply adding more enemies. The roster of enemies is greatly expanded upon, and the new enemy pairings throughout the world help the game feel so much more diverse.
Now that's not to say that Tears of the Kingdom is perfect. There are plenty of negative things that people can say about the game. That said, a lot of that is subjective, and for us, we don't really agree with a lot of it. We love this game, and ultimately what you like and dislike about the game is for you to decide. In our opinion, the incredibly unique gameplay and expansive world that Tears of the Kingdom offers makes it unequivocally and undoubtedly number one on our list of favorite games within the Legend of Zelda series.
So there you have it. According to us, these are the top 10 best Zelda games. What do you think? Do you agree or disagree with us? What do you think the top 10 best Zelda games are? Be sure to let us know in the comments section below. In addition to that, if you enjoyed the video, we'd really appreciate it if you liked and shared it as well. Also, if you're not already, be sure to hit the subscribe button so that you'll know whenever we release new videos. Since we just gave you all our top 10 favorite Zelda games, we're actually going to be releasing a video in the near future where we compare our Zelda rankings to your all's. How are we going to do that though? Well, you'll just have to wait and find out in future videos. Until then, thanks a ton for watching. We really appreciate your support, and without further ado, from all three of us, goodbye.
Bye.
Hear me scream, I'm here to break your streamer. Hog, hear me scream, I'm here to break your streamer.